A warm welcome to Anuradha Vedic Astrology. Today, we are going to talk about Vargottama Planets with Penny. But before that, a big thanks to all of you for liking, sharing, and subscribing to our YouTube and Spotify channels and writing in your comments and your suggestions there. If you haven't subscribed to our videos and our audios, please do. And do remember to press the bell icon so that you can get the updates ASAP. So, Penny, what are you going to teach us today?
Well, I'm going to talk about a beautiful source of strength in a chart,
Great.
which is
Look forward to it.
add a particular word to Vargottama, and the word is qualified Vargottama. So that's what I'm going to do. How to spot them very easily, very quickly, like seconds. You can just look at a chart and see all the grahas or lagna that's Vargottama. So I'm going to show you a very quick, happy technique to do that. And then we're going to just discuss how important they are, where they are in shastra, etc.
Great, great.
Okay, ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, let's just come back to qualified Vargottama. It's a source of strength. You know, we have many ways of evaluating strength of grahas. You know, obviously, ucha, strength, swarashi, strength. Vakra retrogression is a strength because the graha is very bright. So there are sources of strength, digbala, various ways. But here is another source of strength, kind of an underlying strength, because it requires knowing where the graha is in the queen of the Amsha charts, the Navamsha chart. So let's just first even break down the word. So this is a compound, of course, samasa, and it's broken into varga, which is amsha or division, and also uttama, the best. So this is supposedly the best division of a rashi. I'm going to come back to the shastra that describes Vargottama and the implications of that. But it's important to understand that how we gain knowledge of all of astrology is based on the three means of gaining knowledge, pramanas, that come from, of course, the Yoga Sutras. So in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali talks about direct perception as a true pramana, anumana, the inference from that direct perception, and then agama, the received tradition. So when we're studying in our times, modern times, it's always still important to understand that basically, you know, there's an expression, there's nothing new under the sun. And all the concepts are actually there in the tradition. So received tradition is in the form of the actual shastra, but it's also in the form of the oral tradition. And also the stories, the itihasas, the Ramayana, all of this is received tradition. And we always honor it because it is a true pramana, an authentic way of gaining knowledge. So when we think about a concept like Vargottama, the first question should be, where is it in Shastra? Why are we even talking about this if it isn't mentioned in Shastra? And so there's the stage. It's mentioned in several places, but I quite like this definition of Vargottama that's in Mantreshwara's Padidipika. And it's in the third chapter, first shloka. And it's an interesting definition because it isn't based on a graha. So the definition is that Vargottama is the designation given to that particular little piece in the Navamsha, the Rashi in the Navamsha, which is the same sign as that of the Rashi itself. So how I like to say this, and of course, this may not be correct in every case, is let's say you have a large family, and the father of the family, his name is John, and he has kids, and he names one of them John Jr. So there may be this sort of affinity between Father John and John Jr. because he looks just like him. So this is this idea, that little piece of the Navamsha that looks just like that section in the Rashi, there's an affinity for that. And so that's the best part of that particular Rashi, the part that looks exactly the same in the Navamsha and in the main chart, because we can actually think of the main chart as the parent of all the divisional charts.
So
In fact,
I'd like to add one more thing from Dhruvanadi.
Sure.
From Dhruvanadi. For people who've read C.S. Patel Saab's book, you can always check into the Dhruvanadi portion of it. In the Navamsha is very critically stated, and I use it as a principle for my classes also, that Dhruvanadi has very categorically stated about the D1 and the D9. Okay, and it can be extended. And I know many people who extend it to divisional charts also. Today, Penny, what you have taught about is Vargottama in the sense it's in the same Rashi. Okay, and that is something that is mentioned in the Dhruvanadi, along with the fact Dhruvanadi also mentions Vargottama Bhava. So, if my Jupiter is in the 9th house in the D1, and that could be in the sign of Scorpio, but in the D9, if it's in the 9th house, say in the sign of Pisces, then since both have an expression in the D1 and the D9, it is Vargottama there also, but the Vargottama changes from Vargottama as in Rashi to Vargottama Bhava. And
that's beautiful.
Thank you. And so that means consistently over a period of time, our rishis, our scholars have been using this principle of Vargottama very, very strongly, so far as to evolve it not just into the Vargottama Rashi, but also as Vargottama Bhava.
Yeah, I actually do that in a class on Mahapurusha yogas, where it's a Vargottama yoga, even if the Rashi might be different. So I think we're right along in the same lines, Anuradha. Thank you for that. So the thing is, though, as we usually see, most of the times we're talking about Vargottama is in terms of a graha, that a graha is in a particular Rashi in the main chart and in the Navamsha chart. But then the question becomes, is it best for that graha? So for example, if Saturn is in Aries, right, and it's Vargottama, it means it's going to be Nicha in both the main chart and in the Navamsha chart. And therefore, that particular Vargottama needs to have something else going on to qualify it.
Yes, or if it's just it's not qualified, it does. In fact, it gives very bad results. Yes,
exactly. That's the point. So we can't think about this without qualifying it. That's and now, is this just our idea that we need to do that, or is there an indication in shastra that points to the need for doing that? So I'm going to return again to Paladipika. So sometimes you find little jewels in funny places, so it may not be in a chapter where you're, reading along and then all of a sudden, there's a shloka that reveals something. And that's true in a chapter in Paladipika, chapter 20, which is a chapter on dashas, by the way. And this shloka states the following: the dasha of a graha, that is Vargottama, will give very favorable results. But then it goes on to say, if the graha is nicha or combust, it would give at best mixed results, at best. So it's already telling us, be careful. The more problematic a Vargottama graha is, the less it is going to give good results. So qualifying a Vargottama is of utmost importance. And there are many ways that we can qualify. I don't know that I'm going to get into that so much today, but many of your listeners already know if the graha already is strong, Let's say it's a full moon. If the graha has a very strong dispositor, that might be another way. And it isn't just grahas we qualify, we also qualify lagna. So a Vargottama lagna is highly regarded in the shastra, highly regarded. But that too requires some kind of qualification. If it's a very afflicted lagna in both, might not give those same results. So shastra gives what I love to call the platinum standard or the gold standard for a particular combination, the gold standard. And then we have to understand the spirit of what's being said. And so there's the letter of the law and there's the spirit of the law. And sometimes we reject things because it isn't the letter of the law. And sometimes we overvalue things when we should be looking more at the spirit of it, what's really being
said,
taught here. Yeah, what's really being said here. Okay, so I wanted to give this as an introduction to this whole question of Vargottama. Now, the other thing is that all through Shastra, you've mentioned Dhruvanadi, but all through the Shastras, it's clear about the value of Vargottama, because in the yoga chapters of many Shastras, there are yogas built on Vargottama grahas. And yoga chapters can almost be like a master class in learning what the rishis value. And if you start to learn all the little, what should we call them? I usually call them Legos pieces that the rishis put together to form all these different yoga. It's like a child puts Legos pieces.
Yes.
Little factors. And if you understand, they're like pieces of auspiciousness. And you can almost, as you look at a chart, intuit yoga by looking at these pieces that have come together, even if you don't know its name. You know, you already know, oh, I know that's an auspicious.
It's how it's functioning, yes.
Exactly. And you could build your own, heroes in these combinations, rather than let a computer kind of basically spit out a list of yogas. Then who's the Jyotishi then? You are the computer. So you need to recognize these pieces. And if the yoga chapters are telling you, are building beautiful Raj yogas based on Vargottama grahas, that is your signal that Vargottama is worthy. It's an important factor in giving auspicious results. So I just wanted to say that. And yet, will every Vargottama graha, can you expect every Vargottama graha? Sometimes I hear these things, don't take into account anything else. If it isn't giving good results on its own, then why even bother? So no, it isn't going to be regardless of anything else. It's sitting in an ecosystem. It's sitting in an ecosystem of a chart. And that chart is going to be the arbiter of whether this is a qualified Vargottama that indeed will give the results. And so it's the discernment of the Jyotishi to know when this yoga will happen, when a Vargottama graha will indeed act as if it's almost like a swagraha. Discernment has to always be there. There's no formula. It's always going to depend on the patterning in the chart and the strength of the lagna and the lagna lord. Okay, so with that in mind, one of the things that might be very handy dandy, which I think people would enjoy, is finding Vargottama at a glance. So everybody is capable of looking at the Rashi chart and probably in under 30 seconds identify the Vargottama grahas and if it's a Vargottama lagna. So I'm going to give you a little technique. Now, it does depend on knowing something very important. It depends on knowing sign qualities. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's important for you to know which rashis are chara rashis, which are stira rashis, and which are dvisvabhava rashis. Because finding Vargottama very, very, very quickly depends on that. You don't have to draw up a whole Navamsha chart. No, you can just do it in your head. I'm telling you, under 30 seconds. How? Okay, let's take a look. So here's a nice way of thinking about how the Navamsha is put together. It's put together in 3 groups of 10 degrees. So we have the first third goes from 0 to 10 degrees. And the second third, if you add 10 to these numbers, you get the second third. So all you have to do is add 10, and you get the 10 degrees to 1320. This is 0 to 320. And then the third group, you add 20. So very quickly, you can figure this out. At the end of 10 degrees, the next group of 3 starts. At the end of 20 degrees, the next group of 3 starts. And the math is exactly the same. It's beautiful. So now here's the shortcut. Any graha that's in a Chaturrashi, and we now know the 4 Chaturrashis, in the first Navamsha is going to be Vargottama. Any graha in a Sthira Rashi in the 5th Navamsha is going to be Vargottama. Any graha in the 9th Navamsha of a Dvisvabhava Rashi is going to be Vargottama. And that is true of the Lagna point as well. And it's so beautiful. Think about this. The Vargottama placements are 1st, 5th, 9th. The Dharma trine, you can even think of it that way. The auspiciousness of 1, 5, 9. We see it all the time. This is how Jupiter aspects 1, 5, 9. And so these are the Vargottama placements for the various sign qualities. With this in mind, it's just at a glance in a chart. So we're going to take a look at a chart, shall we? And see how this works. Okay. Spotting Vargottama. Okay. So the first thing that I recommend is look at all the grahas that are in Chaturrashis. So in this particular chart, there's quite a few, right? Rahu's in Aries, Venus and Moon are in Cancer, Ketu is in Libra, and Mars is in Capricorn. So the 4 Chaturrashis. So what we've learned is any graha in a Chaturrashi will be Vargottama if it's in the first Navamsha. So the first Navamsha is 0 to 320. Once it's hit 320, it's already more than 320. So has to be just up to like 2 degrees, 59 kind of thing. Right away, we are eliminating all of these grahas, including the moon. The moon just misses. And immediately, you could see this, immediately you see that Venus is in the first Navamsha. It's the only Chaturrashi in the first Navamsha. Venus is Vargottama, right? Isn't that fast and easy? Yeah. Now, the question of qualified can come up, and I don't want to go through all the ways of qualifying, but retrogression is definitely one of the ways of qualifying. So this Venus is going to give. So this Venus, being a qualified Vargottama, is going to contribute. There's problems in a Pisces chart with Venus, so we're not skipping over the fact that there may be issues, but in certain areas of life, this person is going to hugely excel. Right. So now there's no grahas in fixed rashis in this chart, so we can't explore that. But there are a number of grahas again in Dvisvabhavas. So what we've learned is that and in fact the Lagna is also in a Dvisvabhava Rashi, if they're in the last Navamsha, 26, 40, right, to 30, that graha is going to be Vargottama. And so the Lagna is not, but Jupiter becomes. Yes. These 2 guys are not, neither is Saturn. And how amazing is this? Because already her Lagnesha is Swarashi, Digbala, and now it has an added strength. It is
also Hamsa Yoga. Hamsa Yoga.
And it's a Hamsa Yoga, yes. It's a qualified Vargottama because it already is Swa. It already has strength. And so this is huge, beautiful Vargottama, powerful Lagnesha. Yes, it's destabilized by Saturn, but in the face of this is a person who is so good at making lemonade out of lemons, that whatever is impacting her, she will triumph. And it is part of one of the most magnificent Saraswati yogas that you're going to see, with almost like triple strength Jupiter, a Bhadra yoga, Mercury, and now, yes, Bhadra yoga Mercury, and a qualified Vargottama Venus. See, now we add the strength. It is, again, Venus may have problems. There were definitely problems with her own ability to have children, for example. But this is Pearl Buck. Pearl Buck is a Nobel Prize winner, a Pulitzer Prize winner, author of The Good Earth. I'm not sure.
I've heard about it. The Good Earth was Pearl S. Buck. Very beautiful books. I've read her.
And she started orphanages and also adoptions. There, you could not adopt a cross racial or American. You couldn't adopt a child from China. The American soldiers who fathered children in China and even married Chinese women were not allowed to bring those children before her. So she did so much work in trying to establish these beautiful adoptions all over the world and orphanages for children. So you see, the fifth house played out very strongly. And Venus played out very strongly in that ability to write. But for her own, there were tragedies around her own child. But the point here is, how fast did we do that? We looked at the chart, immediately see Dvisvabhavas, there's only one that's in the last Navamsha. Chaturashis, there's only one that's in the first Navamsha. And so, bingo, and there's no Sthirarashis. Let's do it again, shall we? Let's do it with another chart. So here is an interesting chart. No, shh, don't, shh. Let everybody see it for themselves. Okay. So I usually start with, what has the most, okay? So this chart is loaded with Sthirarashi grahas. So now the question is, for Sthirarashis, we're looking at the fifth Navamsha. So yes, you do have to remember that the fifth Navamsha starts 13 degrees 20 to 16 degrees 40. So immediately you go to the ascendant degree. Oh, it's 14 degrees 38. She has a qualified Vargottama Lagna. It too needs to be, well, I said qualified. She's a Vargottama Lagna. It needs to be qualified. It's highly qualified because of Jupiter aspect, and also the Parivartana qualifies it. It hosts a very auspicious yoga. You might say, well, how auspicious is it? It's a Dainya Parivartana yoga. It's with the 12. It brings the Lagnesha back in. That makes this a very important yoga. So it's quite qualified.
And she also
now
has a sun, which is...
Let's move to the sun. So the sun is also between 1320 and 1640. Venus just misses, right? And Mercury also not. But what if we found like that? We look, oh, there are two things in Sthirarashi, but let's continue. Oh, Saturn is also in between 1320 and 1640. Saturn is a qualified Vargottama. So she now has qualified Vargottama Lagna, qualified Vargottama Sun, because when Mars comes back in, this makes this a very powerful dispositor for the Sun. And then a qualified Vargottama Saturn because it's retrograde.
The Saturn is also Dikvali. The Saturn is also Dikvali.
Sometimes we use that, sometimes we don't, because sometimes in a Bhava Chalita, it won't be in an angle. So it's not as firm a qualifier as retrograde, which won't change. Anyway, then we're going to look for our Dvisvabhava, and nothing in Dvisvabhava. Let's go with our Chaturrashi. So there are only 3 in Chaturrashi, and our eye should immediately fall to Jupiter. Chaturrashi, first Navamsha. So the first Navamsha, Jupiter's in the first Navamsha. It's Vargottama. it qualifies in 3 different ways. It qualifies because it's ucha, it qualifies because it's retrograde, and it qualifies because it has a strong dispositor.
Yes.
So this would mean that whatever Jupiter stands for in this chart might be off the charts. It might be just incredibly powerful. Jupiter is the 5th lord here.
In the 9th house, exactly, that's what, yes.
And aspecting back. And Jupiter and Moon are forming Gauri Yoga. So Gauri Yoga is when the Moon is Swa or exalted in a Kendra or Trikona and aspected Vayuti with Jupiter, which she has. The brightest among the bright, Parvati, it's Gauri, very auspicious yoga. And also a beautiful Saraswati yoga. She too has a Saraswati yoga. There's some combustion to Venus here. It's not as strong, but still. 5th house highlighted. Beautiful Gauri yoga. This is Andan, who is Barack Obama's mother. This 5th Baba is describing her son.
Son, yes.
So beautiful. And now that we know how the other strength now of being a qualified Vargottama adds to this whole thing. So in the Jyotish world, things are always bubbling up, and that's very natural. We all have inquiring minds, we all have our own opinions, all of that. And so, there's bubbling around that, is Vargottama really something that we can count on? Is it really something that we can work on? And the answer is, well, if you are properly interpreting a Vargottama Graha, if you are not just taking every Vargottama Graha, as it says in Shastra, should act like Swa or exalted Graha. Again, it's giving us the platinum standard. And then it's up to us to look at that very carefully. And sometimes we'll find, no, if the Vargottama Graha is debilitated, if it's dispositor is debilitated, if it's combust, if it's losing a planetary war, if it's a new moon, there are many reasons to say, well, this isn't going to give the results that it should. But that doesn't mean, based on one graha that isn't giving good results and it should because it's Vargottama, that isn't how we look at things. We always look at the ecosystem of the chart and then draw on conclusions. So Shastra is clear as a bell, based on Vargottama Grahas form parts of auspicious yogas, the Dhruva Nadi that you mentioned, so beautiful, thank you for that. And the very definition of it, that this is that definition of Vargottama. It could be the best part of the Rashi, or as you're saying, Baba, from the Dhruva Nadis. And so I think it's important for us to always remember that there is no cookbook. There is no one thing that will always be true. We always have to use Anya, our discrimination in Jyotisha. So exactly. I hope this, but mainly one of the things I really wanted to do is to show you this very quick way. You don't have to look at the Navamsha chart. You don't have to draw it out. All you need to know is what's Chara, what's Stira, what's Dusvabhava 159.
Exactly. Very well put. Very beautifully put, Penny. And what more, I'll just add in one thing that one of my teachers have always taught me is that it's a science, and science will not be 100% accurate. And secondly is the science stands corrected with 18 Pravakartas writing on it. The science is something that we have to live up to. Our interpretation could at times be faulty because we could be leaving out on things that we have been taught in basics to study, but in a hurry. And as a student who's evolving, I can tell you that I've always been in a hurry and I have made my fair share of mistakes, still do. So we could be leaving out important points and then going back and saying that it's not working. So don't do that. Look into what they are saying in totality, and probably we pick up so many beautiful gems that it just enriches our day.
In fact, The charts that don't seem to work are our best teachers, because then they force us, why? And I mean, it can be, you're absolutely right. It may be that it's in the hand and it's not in the chart, that thing in their life. You can't see it in the chart, but it's in their hand. So this is why we have these sisters, that
Helping you out.
intersect
Yes.
with Jyotisha. However, if you're finding chart after chart after chart is not working, it may be, that you have to dive deeper into the studies. In fact, let me just end with this very story that I just love, which is, it's an embarrassing story, but I had a very Rajasic mind. It skips here and there and there and there. When I went to my teacher, he would teach a point, but I also had very good memory for charts. So he would give a vichara, he would be teaching something, and in my mind, I immediately thought of 4 charts where that didn't work. And I would say, oh, but then, so he put up with it, for maybe a class or 2, and then afterward got pulled aside, and he said, you will never be a Jyotishi. You should be finding the match, the charts that match to what I'm teaching, not the charts that don't match. And you should be making a pile. The charts that don't match, you just put them in a pile. The chart that match, you put them in a pile. And you should have, if I'm authentically teaching you, the higher pile will be the ones that work. The lower pile might be almost as high in the beginning. As you continue to learn, you will start taking ones out of the ones that didn't work into the ones that did work based on your further studies. And I remember a day when I sat in class and Hart's teaching something, and all of a sudden I just start smiling because I could see that what he taught me, we're going to take a bunch of things out. And he looked over at me, he said, oh, you took some off the pile, didn't you? And so that had been an ongoing joke between us. So I wanted to end with that story because I love stories.
Beautiful, beautiful, Penny. So till we meet with you again, stay safe. And all of you, look into the Vargotamas in your chart and see how they bring out the results. See if there's a qualification that you need to talk about, you need to read about. And we'll get back to you soon. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Penny.
My pleasure. Thank you
Please
so
hit
much
the bell
for
icon
hosting me.
for fresh updates. Don't forget to like, share and comment on the videos, and please subscribe to our channel.